Purdue University College of Agriculture has a long history of impact in research, education, and cooperative extension to improve agriculture and the role of agriculture in our society. One of the ways that we continue to do that is in this realm of digital agriculture. It's the fusing of our physical and social worlds to make improved data-driven decisions and actions. So you'll see a website up there in the corner. We encourage you to visit that, purdue.ag/digag. I'm Dennis Buckmaster, a professor of agricultural and biological engineering, and I also serve our dean and our associate deans as a Dean's Fellow for Digital Agriculture to coordinate activities in the college, at the university, and through to external stakeholders regarding data-driven, technology-intensive agriculture. One of the projects that we have is the Wabash Heartland Innovation Network. The WHIN project is not exclusively a Purdue project. It is a partnership with WHIN, the organization, the community foundations in a 10-county region of west central Indiana, of course Purdue, as well as Ivy Tech Community College, and many partner organizations, farms, manufacturing firms, etc. The focus of the WHIN project is to increase the role of advanced technology in agriculture and manufacturing. In this series of brief presentations, you're going to learn of how the WHIN funds are being used to advance the technology in agriculture. So whether this particular video covers the capturing, the clustering, the collecting, or the computing, you'll have to wait to see. But in each of these cases, we are moving forward the technology in agriculture through digital means.
I appreciate the opportunity to get on here and talk about my research. So my name is Richard Smith, and I am a graduate student at Purdue University studying agronomy. My major advisor is Dr. Shaun Casteel, and my committee members include Drs. Melba Crawford, Jason Ackerson, and Keith Churkauer. My research was funded by the Wabash Heartland Innovation Network. So today I'm going to talk to you about my project, Assessing Soybean Stands with a UAV. With soybeans, it's important for farmers or crop consultants to go out to the field shortly after emergence to make sure that there are enough plants in order to obtain a profitable yield at the end of the year. With that, early detection is crucial if you're going to make a replant decision, because delayed planting can reduce seed yield. This is largely due to the fact that later planted soybeans generally reach maturity in fewer days. Therefore, they receive less total sunlight. That in turn can reduce seed yield. So if you're going to go out to the field and do plant stands, there's really two ways to go about it. One is the tape measure method, where you count the number of plants along a known distance of tape measure, and you can scale that up to linear plants per acre. Another method is, if you know the diameter, therefore the area of a hula hoop, you can count the number of plants within a hula hoop and scale that up to plants per acre. These methods do work, but I do have some concerns with them. First, there's too few observations made within a field. Second, they poorly assess the variability of the field in most situations. And third, and probably most important, the aspect of human error and carelessness. So say you went out to the field and you realize that your plant population is a little low. So what number plants actually warrants a replant? Well, the answer is really there's not a number that fits all situations. And that's mostly due to the fact that soybeans have this trait called phenotypic plasticity, which means that they're highly adaptable to their environment. So at a low plant population, the crop can take advantage of sunlight through profuse branching. And then at a high plant population, they have the ability to thin themselves down by reduced branching. This trait is the reason why soybeans have the ability to thrive at such a wide range of plant populations without any effect on yield in most environments. Currently, most recommendations from the universities for soybean seeding rates are between 80,000 and 160,000 seeds per acre. However, optimum plant populations are usually lower than what the university recommendations are, and this is in large part due to the possibility that there could be poor emergence. So that brings me to the main objectives of my research. So the first objective is I'm going to use data to investigate the relationship between plant population and grain yield, looking at multiple terrain indices, and I'm going to be determining economic and agronomic optimum plant population for soybeans grown in Indiana. For my second objective, I'm going to look at the ability of a UAV to assess soybean stands as it relates to the optimum plant population and growth stage. 3, I'm going to be describing some of these processes of assessing soybean stands with the UAV. And then 4, I'm going to model soybean yield and canopy cover using remote sensing and terrain attributes in hopes of identifying characteristics which pose vulnerability to these lower plant stands to aid in directed sampling or for applications in variable rate seeding prescriptions. All of my research is conducted at the Purdue Ag Centers around the state, including PPAC, NEPAC, DPAC, CPAC, TPAC or MIGS, and then also ACRE. All of my research is considered field scale, which means we're doing it at a larger scale and we're using equipment just like a farmer might use. So for example, some of our plots might be as wide as 40 feet and as long as 1,500 feet. So it's common for us to have plots over an acre. This is an example of my plot layout at one of my locations. If you look at it, you can see that it's a variety by seeding rate study. So we planted 2 varieties, and at each of those varieties we tested seeding rates at 50,000, 100,000, 150,000, 200,000, and 250,000 seeds per acre. We did stand assessments, but instead of using the tape measure method or the hula hoop method, we came up with our own method called the PVC cross. We predetermined 2 locations within each of the plots where we collected stand counts in an area of 100 square feet. We used a quadcopter to collect data on the field throughout the season. Some of the sensors we used include a red, green, and blue camera, as well as a 4-band multispectral sensor. We flew at multiple altitudes, including high altitude, which was 250 feet above the ground level, and it covers the entire study area, as well as low altitude, which is 30 feet above the ground level, and it covers only selected regions of the field where we did stand counts. In order to ensure that our measures were accurate and repeated on the same area of the field throughout the season, we installed ground control points. We began visiting the field to collect flight data very early in the season. For this location, our first flight was at growth stage V1. We then returned at V3, and then R1 or flowering, at R3 or beginning pod set, and then at R5. Like I mentioned before, we also collected some low altitude imagery, and with this we specifically targeted the areas where we did our stand counts or where there's a known plant population. If you'll look at the area that's zoomed in with the red outline, what this is the left part of that image is a flight from this date with the 250 foot altitude, and then the right part, that is the same date but from 30 feet altitude, just highlighting the importance of resolution on being able to pick apart these small plants at these early growth stages. Looking at some other types of data layers, this is yield, which was collected on the fly with a combine that has a flow monitor as well as a GPS. We obtained Sergo data, which includes a lot of information, mostly relating to soil structure and soil type. This layer is a LiDAR-derived digital elevation map, and I use this with the help of some programs to create some terrain attributes. Some of those terrain attributes include slope and topographic wetness index, which gives us a way to quantify the lay of the land. So we analyzed all of this data at different scales. This extraction plot layer that you see overlaid on top of this field is the original plot design. So if we were to analyze this in the traditional methods of seeding rate studies, we would use this to summarize our yield data. But we wanted to look at it at other scales as well. So instead of looking at a field with 30 plots, we can break that into much more smaller plots and look at it at a finer scale. Within these smaller plot extraction boundaries, you can summarize any of the data layers that we have, including yield data, the terrain attributes. You can calculate the vegetative indices for each one of those areas, as well as the percent canopy cover. We even looked at this data with a finer scale. This has a spatial resolution of only 5 feet. We use this data layer to extract information from the terrain attributes, as well as the image data, including the vegetative indices and the percent canopy cover measurements. This is probably the most important data extraction layer because each one of these polygons lays over the area in the field where we collected stain counts. So we know the plant population under each one of these polygons. We can use this for many ways. One is for making comparisons between the resolutions of the high and the low altitude imagery. We can also make comparisons between the vegetative indices to see which one best represents or predicts plant population. And then we can use it as an extraction layer for that low altitude transect. And by using those boundaries to extract that high resolution, low altitude imagery throughout the season, you can make some comparisons, like I'd mentioned with the high altitude images, but with a lot more precision and at a lot earlier growth stage. And that concludes this presentation. I look forward to presenting the results, but I have another field season and I need some time to analyze the data. At this time, if you've got any questions, Dr. Buckmaster, go ahead.
Well, Richard, thanks very much for that very good presentation and an overview of your work with Dr. Casteel and others. One question I had, and I understand that you can't give all your conclusions yet because you have yet another season, but are you leaning toward the high altitude flying will be sufficient for making some of these management decisions by real farmers out there in the real world?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dr. Buckmaster. So for the later growth stages, the higher altitude imagery would be sufficient for estimating plant population. But unfortunately, most of the replant decisions need to be made earlier than reproductive growth stages. So usually around around V1 to V3 is when you're out looking for making replant decisions. For the earlier growth stage plants, the lower altitude flights are actually better for making these measurements.
Got it. And then I guess the hiccup there with the old low altitude flights is you have the trade-off of more data to have more confidence in your decision versus fewer data regarding each field, but I could cover more fields that way.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things that I plan to pursue is targeted sampling. So using the results from my data, hopefully I'll be able to identify which areas of the fields are most prone to these poor emergence, and we can direct our low altitude images to those specific locations.
Just one more question. I guess as you think about the process that you went through collecting data for the research purposes, are there some parts of that process that would be relatively immediately useful, like a farmer or a farm consultant, advisor, scout could use this same process even today and make some better decisions in 2020?
Yeah, I think that some of the results that I'm going to be unveiling in the next year or so, hopefully we'll be able to pinpoint which one of these terrain attributes indicate areas where you might have a likelihood of these low emergence. And yeah, this could be used for variable rate seeding prescriptions for crop consultants trying to help their farmers use less seeds in areas where it's not as pressing to have a high plant population. In addition to that, I think aside from the UAV, just having an idea of where you should go in the field to take plant stands, whether it be with the traditional method or with the UAV, I think it'd be useful.
I guess I'm just add another question or comment too. Of course, on many farms, we still have children who certainly wouldn't mind riding an ATV out and doing some looking, taking photos and that sort of thing. So I guess if you can narrow down, here's where we need to check. Even in the absence of a UAV, you could send someone out with a camera and they could have an enjoyable day of actually doing productive work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of potential from this research, not just with UAV stand assessment, but doing methods like that as well.
Well, all right. Thanks a lot. We certainly look forward to sort of the final story.
Yeah. Looking forward to it as well.